Hello, friends, and welcome back to Palmetto Springs, my tropical theme park in Planet Coaster 2. In the last episode, I created the park's first roller coaster, a B&M wing called Jungle Flight. In this episode, I'm going to work on building some eateries for the park, including this cafe I'm calling Cool Cafe that houses a slush hour and a cosmic cow. And I'm also going to work on an open air food court area that I call Canopy Kitchen. Additionally, I'm going to add in a new flat ride to the park located near Jungle Flight. I'm so glad you've joined me today. We've got a lot to do, so let's get started. Since I'm cramming a lot into this one episode, I've sped up the video 4 times. My apologies if this is too fast, but I thought I needed to have both these buildings I'm creating in one episode instead of separating them into 2. The open air restaurant especially took some time for me to figure out how I wanted it to be designed. I can't wait for the next update to Planet Coaster 2 in April, which I believe will give us the ability to create customized restaurants. This first cafe, though, I knew I wanted it to be a smaller eatery that people could stop by on their way to their first roller coaster. Since this is a tropical park, I thought a cafe with cold drinks would be best. I'm sure all the adults want their caffeine fix, and maybe I'll add a coffee shop at some point, but for now I figured a slushy place and a milkshake place would best fit. Although I did not get to put everything in this video, once this cafe was created, I placed plants all around it. I'd love to add in some large trash bins and recycle bins like we had in Planet Coaster 1. I really hope they add those back to the game. I know a lot of people who play this game like to include backstage type areas to their parks, and just having some dumpsters would add so much to the realism. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I hope that they add in some more of these 3D fonts to this game because I really like the lettering that they did include in this game because we were definitely lacking that in Planet Coaster 1, but I'm not really as much of a fan of these 2 fonts that we have. So I would love for them to add in a couple of more fonts to the game, but so far these will work for now. For this building, I'm using the wooden beam wall to achieve that striped look on the bottom portion of the building, and then on top is the plaster wall pieces, and I just like to kind of use 2 different types of wall pieces just to give it a little something extra so the entire building isn't just one look to it, if that makes sense. But I really like this beam wall. At one point I did get it confused with the bamboo wall, which does look very different, but in my head I was thinking, what has stripes? So this is the wooden beam wall though. I know I've also said in another video, I think in episode 2, I tend to start off creating buildings by just building a square. And I know squares are very dull and they're not interesting, but starting off with a square just kind of helps me to sort of get in the zone, I guess, and sort of think about like, okay, what do I want to put here? What do I want to put here? And then just maybe add in another square to kind of give it a little bit of a little bit more interest. So from this building, you can see I do have a main square, but I also have a smaller piece off to the side, it adds a little bit something extra, and that'll be where I'll put some tables for the guests to eat a little bit inside. But for the most part, I want them to be able to come in. They can use the restroom if they want to, order in a nice, shaded spot that has air conditioning, but then they can go out to eat outside. I do tend to create a lot of windows in my buildings just because the lighting, when you create a building and you cover it with a roof and everything, inside it looks very dark. And so the in-game lighting pieces, like the, I don't know, wall lights, and unless you have like the tall like parking lot lights, they usually are very dim. So I like to add a lot of windows to get a lot of natural light coming into the building so that I'm not having to totally overcompensate by adding a ton of lights, or even just adding in a ton of spotlights. So that's why I add in a lot of windows. So you will probably see that throughout this entire series. I'll add a bunch of windows to buildings. So now I am adding in the counters. I really debated having counters versus the box shops. And I think I ended up going with the box shops just because I just thought it was a little bit easier, and I didn't necessarily need the aesthetics of creating a counter. It's a little bit different, I think, with like the guest information building, like the welcome center that I created. I use counters just because I just feel like when you're at, I guess maybe if you were at a ticket booth, you could use like the box shop. But since it was like a walk-in building, I felt like it needed to be a counter. But in this instance, I thought the box shops were just a little bit easier to deal with. I didn't necessarily think that there needed to be counters. I don't know. And then too, the box shops also have their own little branding inside, their own little interior. And so, I don't know. I just felt like since these were two separate shops, and they weren't the same, then I thought the box shops worked best. And I have no idea if that is like the official term. I'm just calling them box shops because they're shaped like a box. So that is my term. I don't know if it's probably not even like the correct thing to say, but that's what I'm calling them. So I also tend to use TVs just to put like a logo or whatever on them. But some of them do come with a little animation video, which I think is really cute. These two shops, I don't think they had a video, which is why I just kept them on the still picture. But it is really cute when they have like a little video that comes with them. And then those TVs kind of act as like what you would see, walking up to a counter and you see a menu. I could take the time and try to create like a menu board, but I just didn't feel like I really wanted to do that in this instance. I do add little menus in my open air restaurant or food court. I don't know exactly if I want to call it a restaurant or a food court, but yeah, for this instance, I did not create custom menus. And then another thing that was weird, so you will see throughout this video, I will randomly go back to the coaster area. I don't know why the game does this, but I would pick out something and it would take me all the way to the coaster. So that's why you'll randomly see um, me going over to where that coaster is and then like coming back to this building. I was not working on that coaster. It's just for some reason I picked a piece, or maybe it was a scenery piece or something, and it automatically plopped me over, you know, miles away from what from the building I was working on. It was weird. I really hope that they also fix that throughout the game. So now I'm pretty much just finishing up my building. I'm adding in a couple of these little like decorative wall pieces that I think are kind of cute. I add in some tables on the inside. I also add in a little staff door, so it looks like there's a place where my little workers can come in and they go through a door. I also add in just some lighting on the inside, some trash bins, and I believe that's it. I do add, so you'll see towards, I think maybe around minute 13, I add in some lights in the middle of where the tables have these little holes in them, which would be where you would put the umbrellas. So, but on those interior tables, I decided to put in just some little lights so that there's just a little bit more light inside. I also do a custom floor, not custom, but it's a wooden floor to cover up the pathing, and I add in the roof, and that's it. So the roof is this aged wooden roof. It's white, and then I think I'm still using the aged wood for the flooring, but I keep it like a kind of a the default like brownish beige color. I'm not sure what color you would call it, but but yeah, and that is pretty much it for this little cafe. By the way, I hope you're enjoying this series. I am a working mom, but currently I'm on maternity leave with my first baby, and I finally found some time to get around to working on some of my hobbies in my limited spare time. If you're enjoying my videos, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment to let me know to keep going. I always try to respond to comments. Now, we're going to get back to building. We're heading over to the beginnings of Canopy Kitchen, my open air food court. I'm going a little bit against the cool color scheme that I have with this park by using a lot of grays and browns for this building, but I really wanted to convey a little bit of a nicer sort of resort feel for this building, so I'm okay with it not having my typical blue that we've been seeing in a lot of my buildings so far. One of the things that I tend to do when I'm building is I will Google restaurants or whatever it is that I'm building and try to get some images online or even videos. There are actually a lot of YouTube channels out there that are all about architecture, and you can even use YouTube to search for architecture like restaurant architecture or cafe architecture. And that really kind of helps me a little bit to kind of get an idea of what I can do in the game and try to copy some of the things that I see for a restaurant or a cafe or something like that. So for this particular building, I did use YouTube to search for restaurant architecture, and one thing that came up was kind of this open air building. I don't know exactly if it was like a restaurant or exactly what it was, but it had this kind of gray and orange sort of color scheme to it, which initially I was like, maybe I'll use the orange, but I ended up going with kind of this sort of coffee type brown sort of color, and I ended up really liking that. It's actually, I don't know, I guess it kind of looks more like a dusty grayish brown color, but anyway. So just using YouTube and Google can really help you get some ideas on what you want buildings to look like and just give you some real life inspiration. I know there are a lot of people who use Google Earth to look up theme parks and try to kind of copy some real life theme parks, and not that that's bad at all. I totally understand doing that. I think for me, it's just hard for me to use Google Earth. And a lot of the time I'm on my tablet. I'm not on like a supercomputer when I'm looking at stuff. So I tend to not use Google Earth. And it's also, sometimes the pictures, can be from like 5 or like 8 years ago, and it's not an updated version of what you're trying to look for. So I haven't found Google Earth to be super helpful, at least in my process, but more power to you if that is what you do. My husband Michael, he uses Google Earth for his theme park stuff, or in the past he has. So I totally understand using it, and Google Earth is so cool. I have a lot of respect for Google and what they do, and like they do things that no one else is doing. So, but yeah, so I guess I can talk a little bit about what I'm doing. So for the most part, this first little rectangle here, this is where people are going to come up. They're going to order whatever it is that they want. I put in a vegan, like the Viva La Vegan restaurant in here. I put a Gulpy in here, and I think I put in a Chief Beef in here. But once we get that update where we can customize our restaurants, I will totally take advantage of that, and so that this feels more like a real restaurant. So people will come in, they'll order, and then they're just encouraged to sit under the longer part, which will have the tables. It'll be covered, but it's not going to be totally enclosed. So there, hopefully, I would think there would be a nice breeze. You can go in, you can feel like sitting down, but you'll get a little bit of relief from the tropical heat. So, So then the only other thing I would say is once I built this building, I thought it looked weird how it was situated. So I do turn it, which took a little bit of time because I had already set up my tables. I had already set up my path and everything. But I do end up turning it. So right now it does look, the orientation is different, but you'll see the final results where it's in a different position. So I'm adding some black rectangles here. Those are going to have my custom menus on them, and you don't actually see that in the video where I'm creating the customized menu. But all I do is I take the text that's in the game, the editable text, and it's not a sign, it's just text you can find in the scenery, and I just use that to create words that have the menu on them. I actually looked at the menu for each of these little stores, little shops, and figured out how much they're charging for things, and I put them on these black screens. So it kind of looks like it would be like, if you go to a cafe and they have a chalkboard with their prices of things on them. So that was what I was going for. For this particular building, I kept the pathing as the floor. I did not choose a floor and like cover the pathing with that. Maybe I'll do that in the future. I don't know. I was just happy with the current pathing. I just thought it looked fine. And then all I did here was I scaled up a wooden support beam. So there's kind of a sort of a checkered board beam, and then I put a roof on top. But the beams really were kind of sort of a decorative sort of thing, and then I also used them to put lights on. So I thought there was a little bit of a practicality to that. So for the roof, I used the wooden tile roof. I was a little unsure on how exactly I wanted, or how tall I wanted it to be, and I think I started off with a 4-meter piece, but then I think I moved down to the 2-meter piece, so it wasn't so super tall. But I kept this sort of look, this L-shaped look to it, and then after that, I put in a bunch of lights on those beams. I did have to mess around with this roof a little bit more than I would have hoped or more than I would have liked, because I was confused on how I was going to connect these two sort of rectangle shapes. But after that, I put in the lights. I also adjust a little bit of the wall pieces because they were sticking out. You see how they're not quite lined up with the roof. And the reason I had like double layered those columns and those pieces was because the columns that I placed down were gridded columns, and they were, wherever I placed them, they were sticking out. So I doubled the wall pieces so that the columns wouldn't stick out, but then it left this sort of awkward space that didn't line up with the roof. So I thought that was super weird. So I ended up having to delete all these wall pieces. I also had to separate each column so that each column was its own building, so that I could place it in the exact spot that I wanted it to line up at. And then once I had removed these extra wall pieces, my beams were coming through on the other side, so I had to move those. So it was a lot of kind of like menial stuff that I had to do for this, but in the end it all worked out. I just hate how sometimes you encounter sort of like weird situations like that, and it's like, why are these columns Like if they're on the grid, why are they lining up so oddly? It just seems so strange to me. Um, and yeah, so I'm moving the beams, and then I ended up, because they still were coming through on the other side, so I had to scale them down just a tiny bit to make them work. And then I didn't take the time to like click on each beam. I just changed the scaling on the ones that were peeking through. So now I'm placing down my picnic tables, and I placed these down, and then I was like, oh, this orientation of this building is too strange. I think the main thing was I didn't like how I had it situated. I didn't like how basically the back part of it was sort of facing away from the welcome center. So in my mind, because the welcome center, on the back part of the welcome center, has an opening where people could walk out of. So I was thinking they could walk out of the welcome center and see the like the front of this building. And so because how I had it originally situated, it wasn't like that. They would be seeing like the back part of the building. So I didn't like that, which was why I reorientated it. I don't know, is that a word? But anyway, yeah, so I placed down all these lights. And then another thing was I was a bit disappointed with these lights once I turned down, the sun and so that I could see how these lights would glow, and they're actually very dim. So I ended up having to put down some spotlights underneath my pathing in order to make it seem like there was more lighting in this restaurant. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed with that. So yes, so I'm repathing some things. And then at this point is when I start reorientating my building. Reorientating? Oh, gosh. Uh, and but you'll see that I don't want to show like me just rearranging everything, so I'll just show you what it looks like, the final result that it looks like. So now you can see the final orientation of this building. At this point, I still have to redo some pathing and rearrange the picnic tables, but that was the final orientation that I ended up with. So now I'm in my main plaza, and I'm adding in some fencing around this reflection pool. I'm also going to add in some lighting, and then I also add in some planters just to add a little bit more decoration to this main plaza. So this plaza is basically the first thing that people are going to walk into when they enter the park, so it has to look special. But yeah, so I basically just copy this fence all the way around, and then I also create this lighting. I just duplicate this lamppost 4 times, and that's it for the most part. Once I add in the planters, I put in a couple of benches, and then it's done. So here you can see some of the planters that I created. I started with a base planter and then I just added in a flower, and then all I did was change the trees that were inside. I also added in some barriers so people wouldn't be walking through these planters, and that was it. So now we're moving on to this second flat ride that I have in the park. This is a Behemoth Swing 360. It's a more intense flat ride, and it's the second flat ride in the park. So the first flat ride that I have is the big wheel carousel, or not carousel, Ferris wheel. So usually when I create parks, my centerpiece, or like the first thing that people see, is either going to be a carousel, a Ferris wheel, or it's going to be a roller coaster. But I tend to have a Ferris wheel like right in the middle, just because Ferris wheels, they're very animated. When they're lit up, they just look really pretty, and it's just a really good way to kind of center your entrance, at least in my opinion. So I have my Ferris wheel that's right in the middle of my entrance. And then I have this area here that has my Jungle Flight roller coaster, which is not the most intense coaster. It's kind of an intermediate coaster. And then I'm adding in this more intense flat ride. So one thing that I do like to do with my parks is I like to create destinations. So this destination, I'll say this coaster, Jungle Flight, is a destination point for people. It's the first roller coaster in the park. This is where they're going to go for the most part. Most people are going to go directly to the coaster first. But I like to add in some sort of supported flat rides that have a similar theme, mainly, which usually means like similar colors. So my Ferris wheel is yellow, orange, and green. My roller coaster is green and yellow. And then this flat ride here is pretty much going to be the same colors, which is green and yellow. And then these rides are going to be connected by this sort of a smaller plaza, it's going to house maybe one shop that has like restrooms, maybe a couple of food options, and maybe one gift shop, and then that's it. But I tend to create these sort of destination areas or zones, I guess you'd call them zones, where there is a like a destination point, which is usually a roller coaster, and then a couple of surrounding flat rides of varying intensity. So usually there's going to be one gentle ride along with a more intense flat ride. And that is just what I tend to do when I create my parks. I just think it adds a little bit more cohesion. So it doesn't seem like I'm just plopping down, random things at random points. I like to have coasters as destination points, and you'll see that with real life theme parks as well. Usually the most intense coasters are going to be towards the back of the park because they want you to walk through the park to get to those destination points. So that's kind of where I get this idea from. And so, yeah, it's sort of a little bit into my thought process as I'm planning out this theme park. So now I'm working on a couple of planters that are going to be in this smaller plaza that is near my Jungle Flight roller coaster. So I'm creating sort of a cross design with this, and I'm going to just place down a couple of flowering plants and then just have a big tree in the middle that's going to provide some shade for people. I'm going to put some benches around here, and I'm also putting in these fence barriers to hopefully prohibit my guests from walking through these planters, since I'm not deleting the path underneath it. So it just was a little too time consuming trying to delete the path and then place the path where I needed it so that guests could sit under here. So that's my thought process with this. So that is it, folks. Here is the final result of my entrance plaza with the reflection pool, my benches. You can see the tree swing sort of in the background. We've done a lot in this episode, and I'm so happy with the results. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. In the next episode, we'll probably get into building another roller coaster. Jury's still out on that, but I really appreciate you all joining me today. Take care, and I'll see you next time.